In the wide lands of the early frontier, where open fields stretched under a warm sun and the wind carried scents of pine and dust, there stood a small settlement made of wooden homes, dirt paths, and fences that creaked whenever a breeze passed through them. Life there was simple, but it was also full of misunderstanding. People came from different places, carried different stories, and held different fears. Fears that were sometimes stronger than truth. Not far from the settlement lived several Apache families who had walked those lands for generations. Among them was a young woman named Nalan. She had kind eyes, smooth dark hair tied with a small strip of cloth, and a calm spirit. She gathered herbs for healing, helped older members of her community, and often walked alone along the quiet trails between the hills and the tall trees. Nalan had never wished harm on anyone. She believed the land was large enough for all people to share. But not everyone in the settlement believed the same. Tension had grown slowly over the years, like a knot that tightened each time someone spread a rumor or repeated a half-truth. Some settlers said the Apache people wanted trouble. Some even imagined danger where none existed. And once fear begins to grow, it does not always stop on its own. One warm evening, the sky soft with fading sunlight, Nalan left her camp to gather herbs near the river. She planned to return before nightfall, but the gathering took longer than she expected. She moved gently through the brush, picking leaves that helped with fever, stems that eased coughing, and flowers used for soothing teas. Her basket slowly filled, and she hummed a soft tune her mother had taught her. While she worked, she heard distant noises, shouts, hurried footsteps, the uneasy movement of horses. She paid them little attention at first, thinking it was simply the settlement preparing for night. But as she walked toward the trail home, she noticed shadows moving between the trees. The air suddenly felt different, like a quiet warning drifting through the branches. Before she could reach the open fields, several settlers stepped into her path. Their faces looked worried and tense. Their hands were not raised, but their expressions showed that something had stirred fear inside them. Nalan knew many of these people by sight. She had passed them before on the trail or at the trading post. She had never exchanged harsh words with them, but at that moment, she could see that they believed something troubling. They spoke quickly, asking where she had been and what she was doing out so late. Nalan tried to explain that she was gathering herbs, showing them her basket as proof, but worry had already taken hold of them, and they did not seem ready to listen. They whispered among themselves about hearing rumors that someone from the Apache camp had been seen near their livestock, or that someone had followed a wagon earlier in the day. None of these stories mentioned her, and none had been proven true. Yet fear often grows louder than reason. As more settlers arrived, the circle around Nalan slowly tightened. She did not understand why they were so upset, but she kept her voice calm and polite. She explained again where she had gone, why she had gone, and how she wished no harm. But fear had turned into suspicion, and suspicion made them imagine things that were not real. Instead of taking her to speak with someone who might listen clearly, the settlers made a quick decision among themselves. They believed they needed to take her away from the open trail until they could decide what to do. Their voices shook, not with anger, but with unease, as though they were unsure themselves but still unwilling to pause and think more carefully. Nalan felt her heart beat faster. She knew something was wrong. She tried to ask for help, for someone calm or fair to speak with her, but the group around her did not want hesitation. They believed they were acting for their own safety, and so, step by step, they led her away from the trail, away from the trees, and away from any chance to explain herself fully. They brought her to an old, unused well near the edge of the settlement. It had been abandoned years earlier, when the water had grown too shallow. The stones around it were worn and covered in patches of moss. Nalan sensed the fear in the group guiding her there, but she also felt a sadness inside. Her sadness that these people who shared the same sun, the same land, and the same sky could not look past their worries long enough to see her truth. When they reached the well, their uncertainty only grew. Some wanted to go back and speak with the settlement leader. Others insisted they could not wait. Their voices mixed in confusion, and the situation moved forward in a rushed, disorganized way. Before Nalan understood what was happening, she found herself lowered toward the dark opening of the well. She cried out not with anger, not with harshness, but with fear and confusion. She asked why they were doing this, what she had done, and why no one wanted to listen to her words. But the sky had grown dim, and the settlers' fear had closed their ears. They turned away quickly, lost in their own thoughts, unsure of the right action yet unwilling to reconsider. Inside the well, the air was cool and still. Nalan landed safely on a patch of damp ground beside a shallow pool of water. The space was tight, dark, and echoing. She looked upward and saw only a circle of fading light high above her. The sounds of the settlers faded as they hurried away, their footsteps mixing with the evening wind until she could no longer hear them. For a moment, she felt entirely alone. Then, gathering her strength, Nalan lifted her face upward and called for help. Her voice traveled up the stone walls and out into the night, carrying her hope with it. She called again and again, each time hoping anyone might hear her. Hours passed. The stars came out, silent and distant. The settlement lights flickered far away, too far for her to see. The chill in the well increased, and Nalan hugged her arms around herself, trying to stay warm. Though fear touched her heart, she refused to give up. She believed that somewhere, someone must still have enough kindness to listen, even if no one had listened earlier. She tried calling out once more. Her voice was tired now, barely more than a soft echo rising through the stones. She whispered a small prayer for strength, for patience, and for a chance to live beyond this moment. Just as she began to drift toward silence, she thought she heard something faint, a distant sound, like slow footsteps on the dirt path. She wasn't sure if it was real. She held her breath and waited. The sound came again, clearer this time. Someone was approaching the well. Nalan gathered her last bit of strength and called out again, her voice trembling but still full of hope. "Please, is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the world was quiet. Then she heard a man's voice, gentle and confused, speaking down toward her. "Hello? Is someone down there?" Her heart lifted. Someone had heard her, someone who had not been part of the earlier group, someone who had come simply because he had heard a call. That voice belonged to Elias Carter, a ranch hand known for keeping to himself, for working quietly, and for avoiding the hurried fears that often passed through the settlement, like sudden storms. Nalan did not know him yet. She did not know what he would do or whether he could help. But she knew one thing. In her darkest moment, when she feared no one cared, one person had answered. And sometimes, in a world full of hesitation and misunderstanding, one voice can change everything. Elias Carter had always been a quiet soul. He lived on the edge of the settlement in a small cabin made of pine wood, with a porch that looked out over the open fields. He worked as a ranch hand for a local family, caring for horses and fixing fences, usually keeping to himself. People in the settlement knew him, but mostly as the man who spoke little and preferred peace over loud conversations. That night, after finishing his work, Elias walked toward the old line of trees near the far well to clear his thoughts. He often took evening walks to breathe the cool air and watch the stars rise over the hills. The settlement could be noisy at times, full of restless talk and rumors that traveled faster than truth. Elias did not enjoy that. He found more comfort in the soft sounds of nature, the whisper of wind through grass, the slow chirp of crickets, the faint rustle of leaves. As he walked, he thought he heard something unusual. At first, it sounded like the soft stir of wind. But then he paused. He tilted his head slightly. It wasn't the wind. It was a voice, tired, weak, but clearly calling out from somewhere nearby. He followed the sound until he reached the old, unused well. It stood between two dry bushes, half hidden in the growing darkness. Elias hadn't walked near it in months, and few people did. It was easy to forget the well even existed. He stepped closer and listened carefully. "Please, is someone there?" came a faint voice from below. Elias felt a gentle pull in his chest. Someone was inside. Someone needed help. He leaned over the edge, holding one hand on the rough stones for balance, and called softly, "Hello? Can you hear me?" "Yes," the voice answered, sounding relieved but exhausted. "I am here." The voice was a woman's, shaking, tired, but still full of life. Elias felt a deep concern rising within him. He did not know how she had ended up down there, but he knew immediately that she should not be alone in such a place. "What happened?" he asked gently. There was a pause before she answered, as if she wasn't sure how much she should say. I was brought here. I tried to explain myself, but they didn't listen." Elias felt a quiet sadness at her words. He knew the settlement had been tense these days. Stories traveled quickly, and sometimes people believed things before checking if they were true. He had seen misunderstandings before, simple things that grew into something larger. He lowered his voice, speaking soft and steady. "Are you hurt? Are you hurt?" "No," she replied, "but I am cold and tired." "That's all right," Elias said kindly. "I'm here now. I won't leave you." The promise came naturally. He didn't think about the consequences or how others might react. All he knew was that someone needed help, and he could not walk away. He looked around the ground near the well for anything he could use, but he found nothing for now. All he could offer her was his voice and his word. "What is your name?" he asked, wanting to help her feel less alone. "Nalin," she answered softly. Elias repeated her name under his breath, as if making sure he would not forget it. "Nalin," he said gently. "I'm Elias. I'm going to help you, but I need to get some things first. I'll return soon." Nalin felt her heart tighten with fear. She had been alone for so long. The idea of being alone again frightened her. "Please, please come back," she whispered. Elias nodded, even though she could not see him. "I give you my word." He stayed a little longer, talking to her until her voice seemed calmer. He told her the stars were bright above them, the air was still warm, and that she was not forgotten. He listened when she spoke softly, trying her best to explain in simple words why she had been near the settlement earlier. Elias did not judge her or question her. He simply listened. After a few minutes, he knew he had to leave to gather tools. "I will return soon," he promised again. "I won't take long." Nalin listened to the fading sound of his footsteps. Though she felt anxious as he left, the fear was less than before. Someone had heard her. Someone had spoken kindly. Someone had stayed, and she had no reason to doubt he would return. Elias walked quickly through the settlement, though he tried not to draw attention. Most people were indoors preparing for night, so the paths were quiet. He reached his cabin and went inside, lighting a lantern. He gathered rope, an old sturdy blanket, and a small coil of wire he sometimes used for fence repairs. He didn't know if all of it would be useful, but he brought anything that might help. As he worked, his thoughts kept returning to Nalin alone in the well, cold, frightened, yet still holding on to hope. He did not know her, yet he already felt a gentle responsibility toward her. Before he left, he took a moment to breathe, steadying his thoughts. Helping her might anger some people in the settlement. They might question his actions. They might not like that he had interfered in something they felt justified in doing. But Elias had never believed in choosing silence simply because it was easier. He lifted his lantern and headed back into the night. When Elias returned to the well, he called out softly, "Nalin, I'm here." Her voice rose almost at once, full of relief. "Thank you. Thank you for coming back." Elias set the lantern down beside the stones and began to tie the rope into a strong loop. He worked carefully, making sure every knot was secure. Nalin watched the small glow of light above her and felt a warm sense of hope growing. "I'm going to lower the blanket first," Elias said. "You can wrap it around yourself to stay warm." "That is kind," she replied softly. He lowered the blanket slowly, making sure it didn't tear against the stones. When Nalin reached it, She held it close and wrapped it around her shoulders, feeling warmth return to her skin. "Better?" Elias asked. "Yes, much better," she said. Elias continued preparing the rope, thinking through the safest way to pull her up without causing harm. He wished the well had wider edges or smoother walls, but he would work with what he had. While he prepared, he kept talking to her. His gentle voice echoed down the well, giving her comfort. "Were you gathering herbs earlier?" he asked. "Yes," she answered. "I gather them for healing." Elias nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I've seen people from your camp bring herbs to trade sometimes. They seem to know a great deal about them." Nalin felt a small spark of gratitude that he spoke of her people with respect, not doubt. "My mother taught me," she said. "She says the land gives what we need if we treat it with care." "That sounds wise," Elias said quietly. Their voices continued to drift through the night. The more they spoke, the more Elias understood that Nalin was gentle, thoughtful, and undeserving of the fear that had been placed upon her, and Nalin sensed that Elias was patient, sincere, and not driven by rumors or worry. At last, Elias said, "I think I can begin now." Nalin took a breath. "I trust you." Elias lowered the rope carefully. "When you're ready, put the loop around yourself. Take your time. Tell me when it's secure." "Time." Nalin followed his instructions slowly, making sure the rope was snug and safe. She told him once she felt steady. "All right," Elias said softly. "I will pull you up. It may take a little time, but I won't rush. You just hold on." He began pulling the rope slowly, hand over hand. The rope tightened, and Nalin rose gently, inch by inch. Elias kept his movements calm and steady, pausing whenever she told him she needed a moment. The lantern light flickered across the stones, guiding both of them. As she rose, Nalin looked up at the small circle of light above her, the lantern, the stars, and Elias waiting. The climb was slow, but every moment brought her closer to safety. Elias did not stop. His breath grew heavier, his muscles strained, but he stayed steady, speaking words of encouragement every few moments. Finally, Nalin reached the top. Elias reached down, offering both hands to guide her safely out. Nalin stepped onto the ground, still wrapped in the blanket, and looked up at Elias, with gratitude filling her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." Elias shook his head gently. "I only did what anyone should do," but Nalin knew that was not true. Many had heard her earlier. None had come except him. She stood beside him, breathing in the cool night air, finally free from the darkness below. Elias picked up his lantern and looked around cautiously. "We should go somewhere safe," he said softly. "Not everyone will understand." Nalin nodded, and together, under the moonlit sky, they walked away from the well, two strangers who had become connected by kindness, courage, and a single answered call. The night felt different now as Nalin and Elias moved away from the old well. The sky above them was clear, sprinkled with stars that shimmered quietly. The cool air brushed against their faces, gentle and refreshing after the long hours filled with fear and loneliness. Nalin walked slowly, still wrapped in the blanket Elias had lowered to her earlier. Her steps were careful, and Elias matched her pace so she would not feel rushed. The path toward the small hills was narrow, covered with little patches of grass and scattered stones that glimmered under the moonlight. Elias kept the lantern held up just enough to guide their way. The soft circle of light around them made the darkness feel less wide and less empty. "Are you warm enough?" Elias asked softly, glancing at Nalin. "Yes," she replied with a small nod. "The blanket helps." Her voice was still a bit tired, but it carried more calm than before. Elias gave a gentle smile. "Good. We're not far from a small shelter. It's an old line shack used by ranch hands during long workdays. No one goes there at night. You'll be safe until we figure out what to do next." Nalin felt a sense of relief knowing there was a place where she could rest. Her body still felt weak, but her spirit was lighter now that she was no longer alone. Each step away from the well felt like a step toward hope. As they walked, the night sounds of the land surrounded them. Crickets sang softly from the tall grass. A distant owl called from a tree near the river. The breeze rustled through the brush, creating a gentle rhythm that followed them. After a few minutes of silence, Nolan spoke in a quiet voice. "I still do not understand why they were afraid of me." Elias slowed his pace slightly, giving her space to speak. "Sometimes people listen to worry more than truth," he said. "When fear spreads, it can make even kind people misunderstand what they see." Nolan lowered her eyes to the ground. "I tried to tell them who I was. I tried to speak calmly. But they looked at me with doubt." "You deserve to be heard," Elias said. "And it wasn't right that they didn't listen." His voice held a softness that made Nolan feel seen not as a stranger, not as a threat, but as a person who deserved respect. They continued walking until the land began to rise gently beneath their feet. The hills were not tall, but they created a sense of shelter from the open plains. Near the base of one hill stood a small wooden shack. It was simple, only a single room, but it had a roof, walls, and a door that closed tight against the wind. Elias pushed the door open slowly. The hinges made a soft creak, but the inside felt welcoming. There was a small table, a bench, and an old cot with a thin mattress. Dust floated in the lantern light, giving the air a soft glow. "Please, come in," Elias said. Nolan stepped inside, feeling grateful for the shelter. She moved to the cot and gently sat down, letting her tired body rest. Elias set the lantern on the table, filling the little room with warm light. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to do all this." Elias shook his head. "I couldn't leave you there. Anyone with a heart would have helped." Nolan looked at him thoughtfully. "Yet you were the only one who did." Her words settled into the quiet room like a soft truth. Elias didn't respond right away. He simply gave a small, humble smile and began to look through a small wooden box on the table. Inside were a few things ranch hands often left behind, matches, an extra wool cloth, a tin cup, and some dried fruit wrapped in cloth. "You must be hungry," he said, offering her a small portion. Nolan accepted gratefully. The food was simple, but it eased the hollow feeling in her stomach. She ate slowly, savoring the flavors. Elias took a seat on the bench across from her, watching the lantern flame flicker gently. After a few minutes, Nolan looked up at him. "May I ask, why were you near the well tonight?" Elias leaned back slightly, resting his hands on his knees. "I take evening walks to clear my mind. The well happens to be along one of the paths I use. I heard you calling, and I came to see who needed help." Nolan felt a soft warmth in her heart. "If you had not passed by." Elias stopped her gently. "I'm just glad I did." Silence filled the room again, but it was a peaceful silence. Nolan let her mind settle. No longer trapped in the tight space of the well, no longer surrounded by cold stone. She was safe, at least for now. But Elias knew safety wasn't something he could guarantee forever. The settlement had already made a choice earlier that day. A rushed and unfair one. If they learned that Elias had helped Nolan instead of leaving her where they placed her, they might react with confusion or frustration. Some might want to question him, some might criticize him, and some might feel embarrassed that someone had stepped in to undo their decision. Yet Elias didn't regret a single thing. The night grew deeper, and the lantern's glow became the heart of the small shack. Elias added another piece of wood to the tiny stove in the corner and lit it. Slowly, warmth began to fill the space. "You should rest," he said softly. "Your body has been through a long night." Nolan nodded, sinking a bit deeper into the blanket. "Will you stay?" she asked quietly, not wanting to feel alone again. Elias nodded. "I'll stay nearby. I'll sit right here on the bench. If you need anything, just speak." Nolan felt comfort knowing he was close. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth of the stove, the softness of the blanket, and the subtle rhythm of her heartbeat slowly calming. But sleep didn't come easily. Her mind wandered back to the faces of the settlers, earlier the confusion in their eyes, the hurried decisions, the lack of listening. She wondered if they regretted it now. She wondered if someone might already be questioning their actions. Elias watched her from across the room, noticing the slight tension in her expression. "If you want to talk more, I'm here," he said. Nalin opened her eyes and met his. "Do you think they will come for me?" Elias leaned forward slightly. "Not tonight. They believe you are gone. And even if they did come, they would find me here. You're not alone anymore." Nalin felt a wave of calm wash over her. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time since the sun went down, she felt safe enough to breathe deeply. Elias continued speaking gently. "We'll figure out what to do. Maybe in the morning I can bring you something warm to drink, or we can plan a way to return you to your camp without anyone seeing." Nalin nodded softly. "My people must be worried. I was supposed to return before sunset. We'll get you back to them," Elias promised. "I'll make sure of it." His words carried a steady confidence. And though Nalin had only met him a short time ago, she believed him. The night passed slowly. The stove crackled quietly, sending soft waves of heat across the room. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing against the walls of the shack. The lantern light dimmed little by little, creating a warm half-shadow around them. Nalin finally drifted into sleep, deep, peaceful, and unhindered by fear. Elias remained awake for a long while, watching over her. He wasn't afraid, but he was thoughtful. He wondered how the settlement would react in the coming days. He wondered if anyone else had heard her cries and ignored them. He wondered why people allowed their fears to guide their choices so easily. But he also felt something hopeful inside him, a feeling that helping her had been the right thing. A feeling that truth had a quiet strength that could not be easily hidden. When dawn finally touched the horizon with pale colors, Elias stood and stretched his tired muscles. Nalin slept soundly, wrapped in the blanket, her breathing steady and calm. Elias stepped outside for a moment, looking at the new day. The world felt fresh, and the sky glowed with soft shades of pink and gold. He knew the hours ahead would bring decisions, challenges, and conversations that might not be easy. But he also knew one thing. He would not let Nalin face them alone. Because once he had heard her voice in the dark, once he had answered her call, something inside him had changed. And that change was now guiding both of their paths forward. The first soft colors of morning rested over the hills like a gentle blanket. Warm light touched the ground, slowly replacing the cool shades of night. As the sun climbed higher, a peaceful glow filled the small wooden shack where Nalin slept. Her breathing was steady, and the blanket around her kept away the early morning chill. Elias stood outside, watching the sunrise with quiet thought. He had stayed awake most of the night, listening to the tiny sounds of the land, waking up the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds, the slow stretch of daylight pushing away the darkness. He felt calm but also aware that the new day would bring important decisions. After a few minutes, he walked back inside. The door creaked softly, but Nalin stirred only a little. A few more minutes passed, and she opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the warm light filling the room. "Good morning," Elias said gently. Nalin sat up slowly. "Good morning," she replied, her voice soft but calmer than the night before. "Is it sunrise already?" "Yes," Elias said with a smile. "And it looks peaceful today." Nalin breathed deeply, letting the warmth of the morning settle over her. After everything she had been through, the sight of sunlight felt comforting, like a new beginning. Elias placed a small tin cup on the table. Steam rose from it gently. "I made warm tea from the herbs I keep for long workdays. It's simple, but it helps." Nalin accepted the cup with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm metal. She took a slow sip, feeling the soothing heat travel through her body. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply sat in the quiet room, letting the new day unfold. Then Nalin lowered the cup and looked at Elias. "What do you think will happen now?" Elias thought for a moment before answering. "I think we should find a safe way to bring you back to your people. They must be worried, and I want to make sure you reach them before anyone from the settlement notices anything." Nalin nodded. "I would like to go home, but I worry. Will they blame you for helping me?" Elias gave a slow shake of his head. Some might question it, yes. But I can speak for myself. I did what was right. I helped someone who needed help. That is all. Nalan studied his face for a moment. His calm expression eased her fears. You are brave, she said gently. Elias shrugged slightly, shy at her words. I only followed my heart. Nalan finished her tea and carefully placed the cup back on the table. I am ready to go when you are, she said. But before we do, there is something I must tell you. Elias looked at her with full attention. What is it? Nalan folded her hands in her lap. Last night, when you heard me calling, I thought it was the last moment I might ever be heard. I had almost given up hope. But then you came. You did not know me. You had no reason to help me. Yet you chose kindness. That choice will stay in my memory forever. Elias felt a warm heaviness in his chest. Thank you, he said quietly. I'm glad I was there. Nalan gave a small, grateful smile. You were exactly where you needed to be. They prepared to leave soon after. Nalan wrapped the blanket over her shoulders, and Elias checked the path outside the shack to make sure it was clear. The settlement was far enough that no one could see them, but he still wanted to be cautious. They walked through the early morning fields, following a path that curved around the hills. The sun continued to rise, warming the air little by little. Birds fluttered from the trees, singing cheerful songs as the day truly began. As they walked, Elias explained that the path they were taking would lead them close to the place where the Apache families often set up their camps. Nalan listened quietly, occasionally pointing out familiar trees or small plants she recognized. I know this land, she said softly. I walked these trails with my father when I was small. Elias smiled. Then we're going the right way. A light breeze drifted across the fields, carrying the scent of pine and earth. With each step, Nalan felt her strength return. The fear from the night before no longer weighed on her shoulders. Instead, she felt hopeful, filled with a sense that the world still held kindness, even in unexpected places. After more than an hour of walking, they reached a gentle ridge. From the top, Nalan paused and looked into the distance. Smoke rose softly from a small group of tents nestled near a line of tall trees. That is my home, she said with emotion in her voice. Elias watched her expression and could see the mixture of relief, anticipation, and hope filling her eyes. Then let's get you back, he said softly. They walked down the ridge toward the camp. As they approached, figures began to appear, first shadows, then shapes, then familiar faces. Nalan's people had been awake for some time. And when they saw her, their eyes widened with surprise and joy. One of the older women hurried forward, calling Nalan's name with deep relief. Younger members of the tribe followed, gathering around her with gentle hands and kind words. Nalan embraced them, feeling the warmth of home surrounding her again. Elias stood a short distance away, giving her space. He watched quietly as she reunited with her people. He saw the gratitude in their eyes, the peaceful relief, the emotional welcome. When Nalan finally turned back toward him, her people followed her gaze. This is Elias, Nalan said. He helped me. Without him, I would not be here. The older woman looked at Elias with deep respect in her eyes. She stepped closer and bowed her head slightly. Thank you, she said simply. But the sincerity in her voice carried the weight of many unspoken feelings. Elias nodded. I'm glad she's home, he said. Nalan's father approached then. He was tall, calm, and carried the wisdom of many years in his thoughtful eyes. He looked at his daughter with affection before turning to Elias. You showed great kindness, he said gently. We will remember it. Elias felt humbled. I just did what felt right. Nalan stepped forward, smiling warmly. We won't forget you, she said softly. Elias returned her smile, feeling something shift quietly inside him. And I will never forget you, he replied honestly. For a moment, the world seemed still, the breeze soft, the sky bright, the land peaceful. Elias knew he had to return to the settlement soon. But he also knew that his life had changed. He had found courage he didn't know he possessed. He had listened when others stayed silent, and in doing so, he had formed a bond that would remain in his heart. Finally, Nalin spoke again. "Take care on your way home, and if you ever pass near our camp again, you will always be welcome." Elias felt warmth spread through him at her words. "Thank you," he said. Slowly, he turned and began walking back toward the settlement, feeling the morning sun on his back. Nalin watched him go, surrounded by her people, but carrying within her the memory of a single man who changed everything by choosing compassion over fear. As Elias walked across the fields, he felt lighter than ever before. He knew the settlement might question him. They might ask for explanations. They might not understand. But he had no regrets. His heart felt clear, steady, and full. He had chosen what was right. He had answered a call that many had ignored. And in doing so, he had helped guide two worlds toward a little more understanding. Behind him, Nalin stood on the ridge, watching until he became a small figure in the distance. She placed her hand over her heart, silently thanking the land, the sky, and the gentle fate that had brought him to her in her moment of need. The story of that night, the call from the well, the courage of a quiet man, and the return of a hopeful young woman, would be told for many seasons among her people. It would live on as a reminder that kindness can rise even in uncertain times, and that one brave act can echo across many lives. And perhaps, somewhere in the future, their paths would cross again, two souls, forever connected by a moment of truth, compassion, and hope.